Hello everyone, my name is Andy Gillard. My friends and I are trapped in a very small town in Michigan. I know, how are you trapped in a town? Why not just leave? I'll get to that later. For now, let me explain how in the hell we got into this mess in the first place. My two buddies, Ryan and Tommy, not their real names, they want to remain anonymous, came with me on a stupid Bigfoot hunt. Yes, I know, childish, but hey, I've always been fascinated with the idea of a giant undiscovered ape living in the most remote areas so deep in the woods that it's possible nobody's been in for 100 years. Ryan and Tommy both are into the existence of Bigfoot as well, so when I asked them if they wanted to travel the 3-hour drive and search for a couple of days, they were more than willing. God, I wish I would have just went to Florida or something for vacation instead. Tuesday was the day we actually hit the road and our adventure began. I can't believe we're finally doing this, Tommy said excitedly as we neared the tiny town. Yeah, we've been talking about this for how long? Ryan was equally excited. I looked down at the GPS on my phone, instructing Tommy when we'd turn onto the road leading into town. 5 more miles, guys. We all whooped in excitement, staring out the window at the vast forest. There was literally nothing but trees for the past 10 miles. This was as remote as it gets. My phone kept dropping in service, one of the downfalls to being so far out in the boonies. If something were to happen out in those woods, we'd be screwed. Take the next left. I pointed to the upcoming road. As soon as we made the turn, there was a clearing, revealing a couple of small buildings. There was maybe 5 or 6 buildings in total, including a small gas station. There were only a couple of people out, but as we passed, every one of them craned their necks to watch as we passed by. I'm guessing they don't see many outsiders pass through. Ryan muttered. Guess not. Hey, take the next right and the motel should be right after the corner, I instructed. As we made the turn, a sign that simply read, Motel, was lit up. The building itself looked relatively nice compared to the rest of the buildings we'd seen up until this point. It was tiny, though, looking like it had 8 to 10 rooms max. Damn, this is one small fucking town, Ryan said as he looked the motel over. This isn't a town, it's a fucking village. Tommy laughed. We all laughed and pulled into the parking lot. We jumped out of the car before it was fully parked, barely able to contain our excitement. Ryan and Tommy walked to the back of the car and popped the trunk to get our luggage. I went inside to book us in our room. When I walked in the doors, I immediately smelled stale cigarette smoke. The inside was in far worse shape than the outside. The walls stained a murky yellow from years of smoke. The paint on the walls desperately needed a paint job as they were crumbling and peeling everywhere. Can I help you? My deep voice startled me. An old man, probably around 60 years old, stood in the doorway of what I'm guessing was his office, a lit cigarette hanging from his mouth. He wore a flannel with suspenders adding to the Hicktown feel. Yeah, my name is Andy Gillard. Me and my friends have a room reserved. I walked up and pulled my wallet out. Yeah. 4 days, right? He walked to the counter and started clicking on a keyboard. I was surprised he didn't shuffle through a filing cabinet for the paperwork. Here we go. 4 days that'll come to 200 even, cash or card? His cigarette bounced as he spoke. Cash, I said as I paid in full. So, just out of curiosity, you ever hear of anyone seeing anything strange out in the woods? He stopped completely and froze. After a second of seemingly lost in thought, he finally spoke. You boys best not go out in the woods if you plan on it. People come out here and do their little spooky videos and end up lost. Or worse. I looked at him puzzled. Or worse? He looked up at me, stared daggers. I felt a shiver run down my spine as he made me feel a little uncomfortable. Just take my advice and you should be just fine, he said before he tossed the key on the counter, then turned and walked away. Should be fine? What in the hell was that supposed to mean? I shrugged it off and grabbed the key, an actual key and not one if the card's normally used. As I stepped outside, I waved the key to Ryan and Tommy with a smile on my face. Holy shit, is it an actual key? Man, this place is stuck in the old days. Tommy laughed. I helped grab the bags, and we headed to our room. I looked at the key, and we were in room 4. We quickly found it, and after stepping in, we tossed our bags on the floor and examined our home for the next 4 days. There was 2 beds and a rather large chair with a footrest at the base of it. "I call one bed," Tommy shouted. "I got the other," I shouted just before Ryan. "You fuckers!" Ryan laughed as he tossed his phone on his chair, dark bed. We all sat and relaxed for a while after our long drive. It was nearing noon and planned on taking a quick walk through the nearby Stateland around 2 p.m. We tried to search if there were any sightings in the area of Bigfoot, but our phones were loading super slow due to the lack of service. After a while, we gave up and just decided to go take our stroll a little earlier than planned. After we piled back in the car, I struggled to load up the directions to the nearest Stateland, and after a few minutes it finally loaded. It said we had just 7 miles to go, so we were relieved to not have far to go. We chatted excitedly the whole way and arrived rather quickly. "Dude, this place looks kind of creepy," Ryan said as we pulled in the entrance to the parking. He wasn't wrong. The trees were so dense that even in middle of the day it was hard to see very far in. "Hopefully after we walk a little ways in, it gets less dense," I said, hopeful. We parked and once again got out of the car. We grabbed our headlamps and Tommy strapped his pistol he always carried just in case. It made me feel a little better knowing we at least had some kind of defense while out here. We walked to the first trail we saw and headed straight in. I had a pack of orange ribbons to tie on the trees as we walked to avoid getting lost, but didn't really need to use it. Our footprints were pretty easy to follow, so we figured we'd save the ribbons so we didn't have to tie and untie them as we walked. A big mistake we'd soon regret. We'd been walking for probably an hour or 2 when out of nowhere it started dumping snow like I'd never seen before. At first, we just grumbled about the snow and how it'd make it harder to see if we happened to see anything at all. Then, the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. "Fuck! We need to go back now!" I shouted as I started to panic. Ryan and Tommy looked at me with puzzled looks on their faces. "Our footprints!" "The show's gonna cover them," I shouted. I could literally see the color drain from their faces as they finally got it. We all turned around and started jogging back the way we came. Of course, our dumb asses strayed from the main trail as well. The snow was falling so heavy it was already having an impact on our footprints, making my anxiety skyrocket. I did not want to be stuck out here for the whole night or longer. The longer we jogged, the harder our footprints became to see, until finally they were gone altogether. "Fuck!" I shouted as I leaned in closer to the ground, desperately searching for our prints. With the snow still coming down and the light fading fast, there was no way I could navigate my way back. Everything blended together, and I had no idea where we were. Ryan and Tommy were starting to panic too at this point, as we all realized just how much trouble we were in. It would be completely dark within the next 20 minutes, and we didn't know if we were 10 miles in or 1. I cursed myself over and over for not tying the ribbons as we went. Just as I was about to go into full-blown panic mode, a noise caught my attention. "You guys hear that?" I asked my friends. They both stopped moving, and we all listened closely, fear plastered across all of our faces. We waited a couple minutes until we finally heard it again. "Hey!" someone shouted in the distance. We all 3 looked at each other in shock before we started frantically shouting back. "Over here! Hey!" we shouted, praying whoever it was would find us. We stopped once again and listened closely. "Over here!" it shouted once again. This time, we heard which direction the voice was coming from, and we all looked at each other again before bursting into a full sprint towards where we heard the voice. We ran for a solid 5 minutes before stopping to listen again. "There!" I shouted and pointed. About 100 yards away, I saw a shadow move before it slipped behind a tree. I didn't find it weird at the time, but I now realize if it were someone shouting back and looking for us, why wouldn't they have hollered now that we were closer? Or an even bigger question, How did they know we were lost out here in the first place? We'd been gone only a couple of hours and didn't tell anyone where we were going. Not even the clerk at the motel. None of that registered at the moment, though. My mind was solely focused on getting the hell out of there. We all took off running once again to where I seen the figure but couldn't see anyone. "You sure you saw someone?" Ryan asked. "Yeah, right here," I said, spinning around searching frantically. "Hey!" Ryan shouted desperately. We waited for a response but was met with silence. "Hey guys." Tommy's voice was shaking as he stared at the ground. We walked over to him to see what was wrong, and when I got to him and seen what he was looking at, a pit formed in my stomach. Footsteps, not boot prints like our own, but bare feet imprinted into the snow. "What the fuck?" Ryan said from over my shoulder. Just then, we heard a branch snap to our left and all our heads shot up and looked over. We caught a glimpse of something moving extremely fast before it disappeared. "Dude, I don't fucking like this." Ryan's voice quivered. I was right there with him. Something felt very off all of a sudden, and I had this overwhelming feeling of dread, like something horrible was about to happen. We all stood close in a circle watching all around us for any sort of movement, jumping at any sound around us. We thought we saw something move a couple of times, but weren't completely sure. It was hard to tell with just our headlamps on, as it was completely dark at this point. As I nervously shined my light around, I happened to catch a glimpse of something in the distance. A light. "Hey, you guys, what's that?" I asked, my heart racing with hope. "Is that a fucking light?" Tommy asked excitedly. Without wasting another second, we took off running full blast towards the light. The closer we got, the more clear it became that it was indeed a light. Two, actually. It was headlights from a vehicle. We ran even faster upon noticing, and that's probably why we didn't hear what was behind us. I noticed footsteps following behind us, and I quickly turned my head around and about shit myself as soon as I did. It was the fucking old guy from the hotel. Only he had this blank stare on his face, and it looked like there was no pupil in his eyes, just the whites. I happened to glance down and notice he was barefoot as well. "Fucking run faster!" I shouted as I pushed myself even harder. We were almost out of the woods, and I could hear him gaining on us, his deep, raspy breathing getting closer and closer. Just as I thought he was going to grab me, we burst out of the tree line, and by some miracle, we were back at the entrance. Tommy reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys, desperately hitting the unlock button. As we got to his car, we jumped in as fast as we could, slamming the doors shut and locking them behind us. "Go, dude, hurry." Ryan looked around us. I was scanning too, but thankfully he quit chasing us and retreated to the woods. Tommy started the car and peeled out of there. "We're getting our shit and getting the fuck out of here," Ryan shouted. "The fucking clerk from the hotel was out there with us," I shouted. "What?" Ryan and Tommy both blurted at the same time. I explained exactly what I saw, and it only made Tommy drive faster. "Dude, slow down. I don't want to crash and be stuck in these fucking woods," Ryan shouted. "No, we need to get back and get our shit before that crazy fucker gets back and kills us," Tommy shouted. He definitely had a point. We drove the 7 miles in less than 5 minutes and jumped out of the car, rushing inside. As soon as we got in the doors, I froze in place and my heart jumped into my throat. The clerk was standing at the desk, the clerk that just chased us through the fucking woods. "How the fuck did you get back here so fast?" I blurted, backing up to the door. "Look, man, we don't want any trouble. We just want to grab our stuff and go, that's it." Ryan said, as he must have realized this was the guy I was talking about. The old man looked us up and down, then turned his attention to me. "You went in those fucking woods, didn't you? After I warned you not to, you dumb son of a bitch," he scolded. "What?" I looked at like he was a lunatic. "God damn it. You boys go in your room, lock your door. I'll explain everything in a few minutes. I've got to call the sheriff first," he instructed. "What? No way you just chased us through the fucking woods," Tommy shouted. It wasn't me, you dipshit. How the fuck would I be sitting here in dry clothes if I was running through the damn woods? Look at yous, you're soaked. He pointed at us. We looked down at ourselves and he was right. We were drenched. I swear you boys will be fine. Just go wait in your room. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said as he'd picked up the phone to dial out. We all looked at each other before silently agreeing to go back to our room to wait to hear just what the fuck is going on this fucked up town. This is where I'm going to stop tonight, but I'll update what the old man told us as soon as possible. It gets weirder, trust me. My sleepy rural county isn't the most exciting place to be a police officer, so I volunteered for the patrol at the old facility. Apparently, some local teens had been using the abandoned building as a place to drink beers, smoke weed, and spray paint huge pictures of dicks on the walls. In an effort to appease the grumpy neighbors who had reported the juveniles, my CO said we should post someone outside of the building for a few nights to scare off the delinquents. I jumped on the opportunity. Nothing better than getting paid to sit in your car and play games on your phone. I got bored fast. Turns out most mobile games these days follow the freemium model. I decided to get out of the car and stretch my legs. I'd never actually been this close to the facility before. I'd heard the rumors. The town was full of them. One rumor said the building was used as a CIA black site to detain and torture terrorists. One was that the building housed a secret lab to pull precious metals from alternate dimensions. One rumor, particularly bonkers rumor that was proliferated by the town conspiracy theorist, said the clearly 70s-era piece of brutalist architecture was, in fact, ancient and had been constructed by a race of aliens. In truth, all I really knew for sure was that the building was built by the government in the 1970s and it was abandoned in the 90s. All this to say, I was curious about the building, and I had a perfect excuse to freely wander its halls. I found the busted window the kids had been using as an entry and pulled myself through. The air in the facility was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. With most of the windows boarded up, the interior was pitch black with the exception of a few columns of moonlight and the beam of my flashlight that cut through the nearby darkness but flung monstrous shadows into the distance. I walked slowly down the corridor. My footsteps sent reverberations off the concrete floors and walls of the deserted structure. The place was eerie, and I was about to turn back when I heard what sounded like the soft crunch of a boot on glass from further inside the building. Quietly, I made my way further down the hallway towards the sound, hoping that what I had heard was nothing more than a mouse or a cat that had taken refuge in the long, vacant facility. The hair on my neck stood at attention as I turned each corner. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I opened each door. Each time I found nothing. Eventually, I found the room the teens had been using as their den. It seemed to have been a cafeteria back when the building was operational, but now was nothing more than a large, dark room with rotting tables and drapes of cobwebs in every corner. Smashed beer bottles littered the floor, along with dozens of half-burned candles and candy wrappers. A box of chalk lay on the ground, next to some sort of intricate design it had been used to draw. I didn't pay it much mind. Feeling better about being alone in the building, I decided to head back to the squad car when I noticed a door that stood unique against any of the others I'd seen so far in my exploration. It was large, black, steel, and chained shut. I wandered over and tugged on the chains that had long rusted from years of neglect. I thought it strange, but wanted to get out of the building, so I ignored it and headed back to the car. I played a few more mobile games and scrolled for a bit on Reddit, but I couldn't get that door out of my head. What was in there? Why would one room be locked so securely while the rest of the building was essentially wide open? What was in there? The thought ate away at me until I made the decision to go back in. I popped the trunk of the car, took out the bolt cutters, and headed back into the dark building. After years of rusting in the damp building, the chains broke easily and fell to the concrete floor with a thud that echoed through the empty corridors. I pulled the heavy steel door open and revealed a staircase that descended deeper into the mysterious darkness below. A line of a white powder lay across the top step. I brushed my foot across it. Salt, maybe? I'm not sure. With great trepidation, I started down the staircase. The heavy door slammed behind me with a heavy thud that made me jump. As I descended, the air became noticeably colder and a chill rushed up my spine. I could almost feel the weight of the building pressing down on me as I moved towards its hidden secret. At the bottom of the staircase was a room. I washed the walls with the light of my flashlight, just a plain, square room with the yellow paint on the walls chipping off with age. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed what was in the center of the room. A skeleton. It was lying face down on the cement floor. A pair of shackles were fastened around each of its ankles. I took a step towards the pile of bones to inspect it more closely when my flashlight flickered once. Twice then, all of a sudden, I was plunged into darkness. A muttered curse escaped my lips as I feverishly slapped my flashlight with my palm, trying to bring it back to life. In the pitch black, I strained my ears and eyes trying to reorient myself in the room when I felt a sudden awareness that I wasn't alone. A subtle rustle and the soft echoes of thin breathing reached my ears. I fumbled for my radio, intending to call for backup, but found, like my flashlight, the radio was dead as well. Panic gripped me, and I tried to steady my breathing, wanting to stay as still and as quiet as possible while I waited for my eyes to adjust. Slowly, something emerged from the darkness. A silhouette blacker than the darkness around it became visible. Someone or something was standing in the corner of the room. "Who's there?" I shouted into the blackness, my voice echoing of the walls. I reached for my service weapon, only to find it was missing. My holster was empty. Had I been disarmed? My panic intensified. A soft shuffling behind me caused me to whip around in that direction. "Who's there?" I called again. 2 pinpricks of yellow light peered at me from the far side of the room near the base of the staircase where I entered. I stared in fear as the 2 pinpricks of light flickered out, then reappeared seconds later a few feet to my right. Another shuffling sound came from behind me, and I spun around again and shouted, "This is the police. Who is there?" I stood in the inky blackness, completely blind, too scared to even breathe when I felt the warm breath of someone standing directly in front of me. I swung my fist out but found only air. Then yet another sound from behind me. It was the loud grating of the steel door being pushed open. What little light there was on the ground floor of the building filtered in through the now open door and provided just enough light for me to find the staircase. I bolted. I ran up the stairs through the steel door and out to my car in under a minute. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, shaking like a leaf in the wind when I made the decision to call in backup. I don't care if I would get in trouble for losing my gun or if I would get bullied relentlessly for calling in backup on what was probably a bunch of teenagers. I grabbed my radio when it sprung to life in my hand. "James, are you all right? Additional officers are being dispatched to your location. Stay put." What? How would they have known what just happened? I didn't call for backup? Backup? I questioned the radio. "Yes, James, we've heard nothing but screams from your radio for the last 10 minutes. It's still coming through now." "Are you not hearing that?" the dispatcher asked me. "No," I replied. "I don't hear anything. I haven't even used my radio. Can you patch it through on my end? Maybe there's a glitch or we're catching up another signal?" "Sure," the radio crackled back. "You're not going to like it." The speakers in my squad car exploded into the blood-curdling screams of a woman crying for help. Her voice strained and cracked in places, the kind of screams someone could only make if they were fighting for their life. Okay, enough!" I shouted into the radio. The screaming stopped for a moment before the radio crackled to life again. "You know what? If you're saying everything is all right on your end, then I actually have a different address for you to check out. You can leave that dump you've been sitting at all night. We're getting a crazy number of calls all of a sudden." The dispatcher sent me an address and asked me to follow up once I'd arrived. I took one last look at the building before I pulled out of the empty parking lot. As I was rolling up my window about to drive off, I heard, faintly and distant, just loud enough to make me question if it was a figment of my own imagination, the same woman's scream that had apparently been broadcast through my radio. My stomach turned into knots. I knew that building was empty. I knew there was no one left in there. Something deep in the dark labyrinth of hallways was trying to lure me in. With a shudder, I drove off. More strange things happened that night. In a town of roughly 400, our small precinct received 12 suicide calls, and when we arrived at the addresses given, no one there claimed to have made a call. We received multiple calls of fires that also turned out to be hoaxes. I personally responded to several calls of home intrusion only for a search of the homes to turn up nothing. One man claimed to have cornered an intruder in his hallway closet only for it to be empty when I arrived to open the door. That night, a small 4-seat Cessna 182 was flying directly overhead of our town when all of a sudden it vanished. It disappeared off of radar, no crash was reported, and a 2-week search after the fact turned up nothing. The most disturbing thing that started happening was the body parts. Every now and then, a random foot or finger or hand would show up. They were usually called in to us after the neighborhood dogs would cheerily drop them off on their family's doorstep. Always a hand, finger, or foot, nothing more. Unexplained things were happening in my own home as well. I'd come home from work and lay down on the couch exhausted. I'd be towing the line on the barrier between awake and asleep when I'd hear my front door open and footsteps walk past me and down the hall. Thinking it was my girlfriend, I'd call out to her, only to realize she wasn't expected home from work for another few hours. People started to move out and no one moved in. Within a year, the population was cut in half. Another year, and it was cut in half again. I left during the 3rd year. Everyone else who was left did too. Eminent domain. The government owns the land now. We were told it was for a military base, but the last rumor I heard was the construction was centered on that old government facility I wandered through some many years ago. I loved my time in that little town, although I don't have much to remember it by. I just can't help but worry that what happened there was my fault. What was it that I unleashed, and what if it spreads? Anyone who has even spent time in a small town knows how rumors fly. Everywhere you go, you will hear gossip about affairs, who was kicked out of town, how the manager of the local diner got fired, and so on. Sure, my town might have those things, but the rumors don't stop there. Anomalies, missing people, cryptids, you name it. Around almost every corner, you'll find something you wish you hadn't. For a bit more context, I live in a small town of about 2,000 people in eastern Colorado. For privacy reasons, that is all the information I will give you about my location. I was born and raised here. After graduating high school, I just never left and had no intention of leaving. For the most part, these rumors are just that. Rumors. Urban legends, folklore, whatever word you find fitting. At least that's what I believed until just a few years ago when I started to get curious about some of the rumors. When I was young, I would just stumble upon them. As I got older, I would seek them out. To uncover the oddities of this town I am so fond of, I am here to tell you all about my small town and all its wonderful and terrifying anomalies one at a time. Starting with Old Man Marley's abandoned car. It was the summer of 2017. My friends and I were bored and wandering around private property. "Hey, wait, isn't this Old Man Marley's land?" Linda said to me with a burst of energy. "Yeah, I think it is." "Why does it matter?" I respond back to her in an uninterested tone. "Callie, you don't remember the old rumor about him?" "You're kidding, right?" Linda remarked with a snicker. "You honestly expected me to remember every little rumor this damn town has?" Just as I finished my sentence, Allie jumped in. "Oh, come on, you have to remember. Kids have been talking about Old Man Marley since middle school." I shook my head as she tried to jog my memory. "You know, the old car in the field that people never came out of or whatever." Yeah, I think I remember something like that, I responded back half-heartedly. Come on, let's go try and find it, Allie said with excitement. I promise you it's not as fun as you think it is, Linda said with a chuckle. Wait, you've been in it? I said with my interest rising. No, I've actually never seen anyone sit in it. I just looked at it from afar and felt creeped out and left. We all stood still in our places. Our curiosity slowly grew inside of us. I think I can remember where it was. It's been a few years, but let's look. We walked around the 100-acre property casualty for the next hour when we finally found it. It was nearly impossible to make out the make or model of the car. It looked like it was once a light blue, but was covered in years of rust and decay, weathered by the hot summer sun and harsh winters. I'm not really a car expert, but it looked like a car from the 1950s. It was slightly sunken into the earth, like it had begun to accept its fate as part of the land. It was about a mile away from a road, so it really didn't make a lot of sense for it to be out there. However, it wouldn't be the first time I saw a random old car just decaying in some dirt. As we got closer to the car, we felt uneasy. The car had a few trees and bushes surrounding it that would just slightly scratch at the paint, making a hideous screech as the wind blew. We were a couple feet away and started to shyly giggle. All of us were unsure as to why we were so nervous. Linda learned to open the door. It took some muscle, but she got it open. The windows were either tinted or became black some other way because we couldn't see inside. Our jaws hit the floor when we looked inside. We were blown away by a beautiful 1950s interior. What was surprising is that it looked brand new. At least I would imagine it would look brand new. The seats were cherry red and leather. I could smell the new car smell from feet away. Fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror, and strangest of all, the radio was softly playing an old song that none of us recognized. I had goosebumps all over my body. We all heard some rumors about the car, but none of us remembered ever hearing about the inside being perfectly preserved. Linda leaned forward and found keys in the ignition. She took a deep breath and sat down. Allie and I both gasped as she hit the car seat. We all froze, feeling like idiots trying not to move as the wind whistled by us. See, guys, I told you it was silly, Linda said as she started to fidget with stuff inside the car. Allie and I made our way around the car looking at it at every angle. Something still felt so wrong about all of it. Sorry to disappoint you ladies, but I am still here. As you can see, I am still in the car even though... She shut the car door before she finished her sentence. Allie and I stood by the car waiting for an uncomfortable amount of time for her to open the door back up. We figured she was trying to be funny or trying to scare us, and we didn't want to get in the way of her joke. After what must have been 90 seconds, I walked up to the door. I flung the car door open, expecting her to yell, "Gotcha" at me or something dumb, but to my shock, she wasn't in the car. Not only that, but the interior of the car now looked old like the outside of the car. The radio was off, and the keys were gone. The two of us spent the next hour freaking out trying to find her. We tried to find her on our own because we didn't want to get in trouble for being on private property, but after finding no signs of her, we asked for help. That was the last time I ever saw Linda. The years passed by, and it was as if nobody cared she went missing. I couldn't even find records of her disappearance online. A couple years later, I was wandering around Old Man Marley's field. I saw the car and was brave enough to open the car door, and I was amazed to see the beautiful new interior that was in the car before Linda went missing. The old-timey song that echoed on the radio sent shivers down my spine. It brought me back to the last time I saw Linda. I pulled myself out of my fuzzy memories and walked back into town. I was planning on just going home, but stopped by the local diner. I got inside just as it started to rain. It felt like the weather was trying to match how I was feeling. I sat down at the high-top bar with the bar stool squeaking in the process. Mrs. Patty saw me from the kitchen and got a puzzled look on her face. I won't go into too much detail about Mrs. Patty, but she has been in this town longer than most people I know. She has definitely seen some things, but that's another story for another time. "Why so gloomy, baby?" she said with a smile and a twang. "It's nothing. I just have a lot going through my head." I could tell as soon as I looked up at her that she didn't believe my lie. She was a stubborn woman, and I knew I wasn't going to win this game. Okay, you win. Have you ever heard anything about that old car in Mr. Marley's field?" Before I could even get the sentence out, her eyes widened. It was clear I jogged her memory. "Oh, wow. It's been years since I thought about that car. Yes, when I was young, we used to dare each other to go sit in it. It started out with people just saying it was haunted because of the music that would play on the radio. Then one day, my friend Rebecca shut the door. I think you can guess where the story goes from there. I never saw Rebecca or Sal again. They just disappeared. Into thin air. Yet another one of the big mysteries of this town," she murmured as she whipped down the bar counter. "Wait, your friends are the ones that started the urban legend?" "Yes, unfortunately. They didn't get justice. It seemed like everyone else just forgot about them." She paused and then looked at me. I could tell she had the realization that I had been to the old car. "Oh no. Don't tell me you—" I interrupted her. "Yes, you remember my friend Linda? She got in the car and never came out. Oh, that poor sweet girl. I'm so sorry, Callie," she said to me in a loving tone while I tried not to lose it. You know, something that always stood out to me about that car was the keys in the ignition. As she finished her sentence, I perked up. What about the keys?" I replied. "Well, I'm sure as you know, when you open up the car, the inside looks as good as new. It looks as if it's been sent back from the 1950s, but as soon as someone gets in and shuts the door, the next time the door is opened, the interior is old and matching what the rest of the car looks like. But do you know what's missing when you open that door back up? The keys." "Exactly. I don't know if that means anything, but where do those keys go?" "I don't know. It's probably nothing, but I'm too old now to do anything about it." "No, I think you are onto something," I blurted out, and I jumped off my chair and ran back into the rain. I ran back to the old car. As I sprinted through the trees and jumped into puddles, I started to think how stupid the idea was. I finally had my eyes on the car. As soon as my eyes landed on it, I swore I felt it looking back at me, daring me to get in. I slowly approached the car, feeling dumb for being so scared, but had to remind myself to stay sharp. I wrapped my cold fingers around the car handle. The sounds of the raindrops hitting the windshield gave me a false sense of peace. I opened the door, and I was greeted with the all too familiar sights and sounds of the car's interior. The saxophone on the radio sounded louder than ever. I put my knee on the seat, making sure that if the wind blew the door shut, my leg would stop it. I leaned over to take the key out and was met with more resistance than expected. I assumed it was just from the keys rusting and getting stuck. As I pulled harder and harder, I started to feel dizzy and lightheaded. I let off the keys and sat for a moment to think, making sure my leg was still protecting the door from shutting. As I sat in the car, I realized how relaxed I felt, how soothing the music started to sound, how soft the leather seats felt against my leg resting on it. I felt an intense urge to sit in the car and shut the door. After a couple minutes, it went from an urge to something I actively had to fight off. I shut my eyes and gritted my teeth, grabbing the keys and pulling one last time. To my surprise, I was able to get them out. The music started to blare and went from a claiming tone to a raging orchestra. It took all my strength to leave the car, but I knew I had to. I heard a voice in the back of my head telling me that if I stayed, maybe I could find where all those people went missing. They had to go somewhere, right? Maybe with the knowledge I had of the car, I could find them and get out. But I knew in my heart that wasn't true. I managed to get out of the car. When I got out, I ran as fast as I could. not looking back. As I ran with the keys in my pocket, I wasn't sure where I was running to. I thought I should maybe give them to Mrs. Patty, but I didn't feel like she should have that burden on her hands. After all, the keys could mean nothing. I decided just to keep them. I got home and went into my room. I looked for a good place to keep them, but ended up throwing them in my bedside drawer. The next day, I went to look at the old car to see if anything would change now that I had the key. The outside was normal, however. I was met with not only missing keys, but the interior of the car looked old, not the typical brand new leather. I felt so relieved. The problem was fixed. I just needed to keep the keys in a safe spot or get rid of them altogether. I went back to my house with a plan to get rid of the keys. I opened up the drawer to find the keys missing. I panicked and dumped the whole drawer out onto the floor. No keys. I searched all around my room for hours. I tried to remember if maybe I never even put them in the drawer, if I misremembered. I gave up and went to sleep. After all, maybe the keys just took care of themselves. Now I didn't have to worry about what to do with them. When the morning came, I had to drive out of town for some errands. I headed out to my car, but before I opened the door, my heart sank as I heard music playing on the radio. I slowly opened the door and peered over the steering wheel to see that rusty old key in the ignition. I felt the same strong urge to shut the door and let the car take me away to wherever the keys take people, but I was focused and got them out. Confusion filled my head. I had so many questions. How did the keys get into my car? How did they fit into both cars' ignitions perfectly? After testing if my normal keys still started my car, I jumped out and looked for a place to bury the old cured key. Before long, it was a foot underneath the earth. I checked my car a few hours later, and to my amazement, the old keys returned. I took them out again. My next attempt was putting them in a box and throwing it in a pond. They still came back. No matter what I did, they always came right back into my car. I even managed to split it in half with some heavy-duty tools and boom. It came back a few hours later. Still to this day, I have those damn keys that just love my car. It seems they need a car as a host of some kind. I'm not a big fan of my car having the power to take me to the underworld at any minute, but if someone has to live with it, it should be someone who knows what they can do. That being said, I never let anyone borrow my car, and that is one of the many strange phenomena of my cozy little town.